Move to the big issue that's popped up this week, obviously the tragedy in Las Vegas. And there's been this debate about when to have the debate. Why do you make the case that it's too soon to have a gun control debate?
I would first say that we've had a gun control debate for a long time. I mean, you look at the presidential race, the NRA had never endorsed that early when they endorsed Donald Trump because they knew there was a clear contrast. Donald Trump was supportive of gun rights and Hillary Clinton wanted to limit gun rights. And so there was a contrast and it was fought out, and ultimately the public had a decision to make, and that was one of the things that they weighed their vote on.
On this issue, we are so divided regionally and we're so divided geographically on this issue that this one feels like it's very hard to find a compromise because people that live in a certain community feel defiantly one way and people that live in another community feel defiantly the other way. This one feels like we don't know how to bridge the divide.
It is one of those issues where you do have very polar opposite sides, where it's not, people real close to coming to a conclusion on a big issue. This is something where people are either on this side or that side when it comes to strong Second Amendment rights or gun control.
Let me ask about some of these limitations. First of all, how would you propose, do you feel as if this issue of mass shootings is a problem that the federal government has to figure out how to solve?
I think over the years, you've seen Congress address different components of it. One of the things that we've seen in some of the past shootings is that there were serious problems in the mental health community throughout our country. We didn't do a good job of tracking mental health, taking care of people that had mental health problems, and some of those people ended up going out and committing mass shootings. We actually came together and passed a major overhaul last year with the 21st Century Cures Act, which had included in it major revamping of our mental health system. With real money behind it too, and that was a bipartisan vote.
But there's been some things that weakened some aspects of the mental health when it came to the database, where there was a fight to allow people that have had, if you get disability benefits because of mental health issues, you can still pass a background check. Should that be the case?
Well, there were some people that we saw in that situation where they had not mental health issues, they had disability issues, and yet because they were on that list, they were getting denied gun rights, not because they had mental health issues, because they had disabilities. You shouldn't take away the rights of people to own a gun just because they have a disability but still have good mental health capacity.
But should we get to a point where mental health should be a part of the gun registration process?
Mental health already is a component of that. And again, we just created the Assistant Secretary of Mental Health in HHS. Just 2 months ago, the new secretary got put in place. So let's work and make sure that gets implemented properly, because mental health is a serious problem in this country. And frankly, we've seen mental health issues bleed into mass violence. And so we've taken action to address it. It's a new law. Let's make sure it's implemented right so we can prevent some of these in the future.
Why do you think we do lead the world in these things? In gun deaths, we lead the world in these mass gun incidents. We lead the world in death by guns. We lead the world in how many guns per person we have in this country.
Well, if you look at
all of that related.
If you look at some of the places where you have bad gun violence, I mean, first of all, let's recognize the vast majority of gun violence and gun killings in this country are committed by people who broke the law to get the gun. But you go to a city like Chicago, some of the toughest gun laws in the country are in the city of Chicago, and yet they have the worst gun violence.
But they'll tell you, you just go in Gary, Indiana. So, I mean, you just go across state lines. You can have all the tough gun laws you want in the world, but if you cross state lines, I mean, that's why they argue for a federal.
I do think something that doesn't get focused on enough are the amount of people across the country who, over the course of a day or a week or a month, use guns to protect themselves against criminals. That happens all the time. It's not reported. So the only thing that gets reported are the tragedies, but it rarely gets reported when somebody actually uses their Second Amendment right with a gun to protect himself against a criminal.
There's been studies, though, that are still more gun deaths are not, most gun deaths are not self-defense.
But keep in mind that most of those gun deaths are committed by somebody who broke the law already to get a gun. We've got a lot of laws on the books, and I'll tell you this, Chuck, one of the things we've seen a problem with is that a lot of the gun laws aren't being enforced. And I do think you've seen a change in this administration where they are getting more aggressive. But frankly, for years you saw actually a 25% reduction in going out and prosecuting people who break gun laws.
Part of this is funding the ATF. I mean,
Well,
there has
they've
been,
had funding, but
but
it's
there has
ultimately the
been
Justice
a lot
Department.
of funding withheld.
Right, but if the Justice
Fairness,
Department
do you acknowledge that?
if the Justice Department chooses whether or not they're going to prosecute, that's ultimately something that they make a decision on, and they were making bad decisions to not prosecute people who broke gun laws. You're seeing a change in that now, and that'll actually help stop some of these gun deaths in the future.
Let me ask you this philosophically. Is there a limit? Do you believe that is the right to bear arms unlimited, or is there a limit?
Look, the Second Amendment really predates the Bill of Rights. Our founding fathers believed strongly in gun rights for citizens. Frankly, they thought it was an assumed right. They didn't put it in the Constitution because they didn't think it would ever be in jeopardy, but ultimately you saw attempts later on to take away gun rights, so they said it's so important, we're going to make it one of the 10 Bill of Rights constitutional changes. And so it is a long history in our country to make sure that you protect the rights of citizens to bear arms.
But is it unlimited?
It is. I mean, you've
You
seen
really
limits.
believe it's unlimited,
You've seen
so-
limits put in place, Chuck. You've seen limits that are already in place, and again, you've seen laws that are on the books, and those laws
So
are
it's
there
not
for a
unlimited.
reason. Well, you're right in the sense that there are already limits on the gun ownership, but frankly, let's go out and enforce those laws. Don't try to put new laws in place that don't fix these problems. They only make it harder for law-abiding citizens to own a gun.
So you do agree there should be some limitations?
Well, obviously, there are limits in law.
But you said they're
on
in
gun
law.
ownership.
Would you have supported those limits at the time?
Oh, I'm sure I would have supported some of them, but probably might have opposed others. But in the end, you have laws that are on the books that aren't being enforced. Go out and focus on enforcing those laws.
Do you agree with the automatic weapons ban?
If you look at, again, some of the weapons that they included in there aren't really automatic weapons, but those laws are on the books too. And again, you haven't seen a decrease in gun violence with those laws on the books. So go and enforce the laws that are there.
All right, what do you make of this bump stock, of this accessory that takes a semi-automatic weapon and turns it into virtually an automatic weapon?
If you talk to anybody about a week ago, most people, including myself, didn't even know what a bump stock was. So
Me too.
Now
Me
we're
included.
finding
I
out
understand.
about it. And
Right.
again, there are people that want to rush to judgment. They've got a bill written already. And I mean, look, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi already said she wants it to be a slippery slope. She doesn't want to stop at bump stocks. They want to go out and limit the rights of gun owners. And so I do think it's a little bit early for people to say they know what to do to fix this problem. I know there are people that are asking the ATF to go back and review their 2010 decision.
think they should?
To authorize it, and I think they should, and they are. You know, you've seen.
But you're not ready to codify it into law.
Well, again, I mean, a week ago, most people didn't know, few people, but most people didn't know what a bump stock was. So to think that we're now all experts and know how to write some, panacea law, it's fallacy. You know, let's focus on the facts. Let's get the facts, and let's go focus on some of the problems. And frankly, we've done some of that already.
Is there a point where somebody's right to bear arms infringes on somebody else's right to be safe and secure at a country music concert?
Absolutely. If they break the law and take away your rights, you've got a right to be protected in your home and when you're out in public. And if you're abiding by the law, nobody has the right, whether it's a gun or a hammer or a knife, to go and deny your rights by trying to attack you.
We're learning that this guy stockpiled a lot of weapons, a lot over the last year. We don't necessarily monitor that type of sales. I know there's always been some concerns about that. Had we been monitoring, he might have gotten a check-in from the FBI or ATF going, what are you up to? And maybe that might have intervened. Is that something you could imagine ever supporting the idea that there is a limit on how many guns you buy in a year, in a month, in a week?
I think it's dangerous for the concept that the federal government would have some kind of list of who has guns and what they have. Because you've seen that, by the way, in totalitarian countries where they use that list to go and take guns from people.
I get that argument.
But it's really happened. Frankly, go back to after Katrina. We saw law enforcement going door to door in the city of New Orleans, taking guns from law-abiding citizens. That happened in the United States of America in 2005. It should have never happened. We put laws on the books to stop government from taking guns, but government and other governments we've seen over history have used those lists to take guns away from law-abiding citizens.
Do you think we have too many guns on the streets?
I think we have people that are out there breaking laws, and again, even
But
if
we
they
have too
break a
many
law to get a
guns.
gun.
I understand that, but have we just got too many guns? In the same way we have too many opioids. It's just where it's just overwhelming the ability to monitor this.
The problem is not that there are too many guns, is that there are people that will go out and break the law, whether it's a gun or some other weapon or a bomb. There's no excuse for breaking the law. There's no excuse for using any kind of weapon to try to take the life of an innocent person.